Hey guys, welcome back to the JPM Performance channel. It is once again time for a shop tour. We are getting into it middle of December, right at December 15th. Here we are right in the middle of the month. So really quickly before we start our shop tour, I want to dedicate this shop tour to Breton Williams, who we unfortunately lost this week. Breton was a good friend and a good racer, and he and I had a lot of good times together at the track, and we unfortunately lost him earlier this week. So thinking about his family and all the friends and the racers whose lives that he touched over these past bunch of years, so thinking about all of them, and we will continue to move forward kind of in his honor, and like I say, this shop tour is dedicated to him and his family. So let's just get right into it, guys. We were actually haven't gotten a lot done this week because we were at the PRI show last week. So if you've never been, there's a lot to see. It's a huge convention center. A couple of interesting things I did get to see. One was the ex-Bob Bramlage F-Production Miata, which is really the car that was our first, no expense spared FP Miata. That car was probably built back in about 2004 or 2005. Certainly not the first F-Production Miata ever built, but the first one where we stripped the chassis all the way down and really tried to make the car as light and as good as it could be. So it was good to see that car. The IUPUI guys at Purdue, Indianapolis University, Purdue Engineering, whatever it is, they have the car now. It hasn't been out on the track for a couple of years, but it looked really good. So it was good to see that. One of my favorite things about going to PRI is seeing some of the vendors that I talk to on the phone and never get to meet face to face. So I got to meet, for the first time, the guys at SuperTech that own SuperTech that I talk to all the time. Obviously talked to my Total Seal guys, and ran into some customers that generally I only get to see at the runoffs, but ran into Michael Chameleon and a bunch of different guys that were good to see. So it was a good time. If you're into CNC V8 stuff, I would suggest you go every year. For me, not a lot of road racing bits and pieces, but there's a lot of cool stuff. Did see John Force, so that's something. Anyway, let's get into our shop tour. So as you can see, I've got a transmission laid out all over the bench here. So this is Steve Johnson's transmission. He's been whining and crying about how fourth gear doesn't work very good, and I basically assumed it was just driver abuse because that's how he is. Shout out to you, Steve. But I did find a couple of interesting things. Actually found that fourth gear, and I don't know if you'll even be able to see it in the video, but fourth gear synchronizer is bent. And when it is bent like this, it does not sit flat. You can see how this wobbles on this gear. Look at that wobble. And the problem is when you go to shift and you engage this slider hub, if it pushes on one side versus the other, it's not going to engage this gear properly. So you can see this new Synchro sits nice and flat, spins even, no wobble whatsoever. So I'm going to replace the outer sleeve there, the slider hub sleeve, and also, as you can see here, this is reverse gear. So I'm not really going to blame him, although it's obviously his fault because he was the one driving. In a Miata transmission, before you go and just slam it into reverse, take your time, slide it into second gear. And what that does is that stops the main shaft from turning, and then slide it into reverse. You see this a lot. Why is reverse harder to get into? That's because the gear, once it's engaged, is actually wanting to turn the opposite direction because it's reverse. So treat your reverse gear easy. So really, this was a brand new transmission that I built last winter that he ran through the season. So we're going to get this fixed, back in the car, and we're looking good on that. On to the ND differential. We were talking about this a little bit last week. Ended up figuring out how to install this 4.77 ring and pinion into this case. Well, the problem that I ran into here is the fact that when you go, these Okay, let's start at the beginning. An ND 6-speed transmission has a 1-to-1 sixth gear. So in order for this car to not be running 6,000 RPMs at 80 miles an hour down the highway, they put in a really tall ring and pinion ratio to keep the RPMs down. Well, those are not good for racing at all. Problem is there's no options for an ND differential. So prior to me getting this differential, there was some work done where they were able to install an NB ring and pinion. Well, they had installed a 4.1 ring and pinion, which has a much larger pinion gear. And when you go to a 477, all of a sudden your pinion gear becomes much smaller. What that means is this ring gear has to move over a significant amount, about 1/4 of an inch, in order to engage it. Well, these cases are so small, there's no room. So you can see here, I had to move this entire shelf over and re-weld on the outside and the inside. So this ring gear rides right in here, and because it moved over so much, I had to do a bunch of work. So this is going to work out. I was able to get it shimmed up. If you take a good look here, you can actually see that I have 3 shims on this side and only 1 on this side. And that is because I needed to move this over. Normally you would have the equal amount of shims on both sides to set your bearing preload and also to get your backlash correct. So it's a little tricky to get just right. Another shout out to Peter Dozman with his slick little tool. I'm actually able to keep it clamped onto the flange of the differential and come over here to this vise and get the diff set up like that. So looking pretty good. Just about have this finished, so we're gonna get that wrapped up hopefully today and get it shipped off to them. In the meantime, I did get in the new clutch for Steve Johnson here. We were talking about the puck style clutch last week. This is actually an X clutch. This is kind of a new clutch for Miatas that have come out, but they look really good, and they actually have a lot of high performance clutches that they use in a multitude of applications. So I wanted to use this clutch. This is going to be a far superior clutch over what he had in there, and obviously it's a full face disc like we had been talking about. So looking good there. Now, just in case you guys were wondering how much work it actually took to get that case on the ND to work, check out my pile of shavings here. I was just getting ready to sweep these up, but this is a fairly significant pile. These are just from machining out that case, the inner case and the main, or the rear case and the main carrier. That is how much aluminum I had to remove before, you know, to create enough clearance. So kind of an interesting thing. I'll get that cleaned up and out of here in the meantime. So because I was gone at PRI, nothing has really happened on this side of the shop, except for my 15 minutes a day on the BMW. So just chipping away on it, little stuff here and there. Obviously we have all winter, but if you chip away in the spring, have I said this before? I think I have. So if you've been watching these shop tours, you know that I always say, keep chipping away, even if it's just 15 minutes a day. Keep after it. So we should have a lot more going on in the next few weeks, especially as we roll through Christmas and get into the first of the year. We've got, we did not get the Cadillac back yet this week for the shop tour, but I am 99.9% sure it will be here next week. And so make sure you stay tuned in for that. Hope you guys have a great week. It was good to see some of you at PRI. Stay warm. Keep working on those race cars. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good rest of your week.